All right, here I'm outside with a couple of cans of spray primer. I'm using a gray and brownish red that I got from Ace Hardware. Honestly, you could really use any sort of spray primer here. I'm just using these because they're relatively close to the final color that I'm going to be going for. So I'm spraying the rock areas gray and the ground brown. And if I get a little overspray on it, who cares? Okay, that's dried. I'm inside now, getting ready to put a base coat down on this thing. I've got some brushes out and some craft paint. Black, white, and brown are the colors I'm going to be using for this. I'm not trying to do anything fancy. This is just going to be a base coat of brown and gray, essentially. Mixing up a little gray here with the black and the white. Just going over everything. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to end up dry brushing and washing this, so this initial coat is just that. It's an initial coat. It's not going to be something that is a final result. Plus, it's going to be flocked, and there's going to be water effects. Just kind of trying to get coverage on this. Keep it relatively neat, but if things get a little sloppy, they get a little sloppy. It's not going to be that big of a deal. I've sped this footage up here. I don't actually paint this quickly. If only. But yeah, watch me go. I've got a little rotating Lazy Susan thing here. Or Lazy Susie. I don't know. Anyways, it's actually kind of helpful. Okay, I've finished the base coat on the rock, and now I'm going in and filling in the dirt section of the terrain piece. Just making sure to get a relatively even coat on this. It certainly doesn't have to be perfect, especially not at this point. I mean, this thing's going to get dry brushed and washed and flocked and water affected, so you're really not going to see a whole lot of this final piece. I suppose I could have used an airbrush here for this, but I don't know. It's the purist in me. I do like a brush. Just kind of coming in and tapping along, slopping this stuff in there. Again, I'm really not after perfection here, just a random general base coat. Making sure everything's got coverage. That spray paint certainly didn't hit every area. I got it good enough for a primer coat there, but not good enough for complete coverage. And you know, I'm saying that you don't have to be perfect, and you don't, but you don't just want to put down, you know, slop either. Keep it as neat as you can without being completely anal about it. Here I'm just finishing up painting some of the smaller rocks. I didn't realize how little I smiled or how serious I looked until I started filming myself. I tend to keep a fairly serious look on my face, I suppose. I don't know. At least when I'm concentrating. Just about finished up with that base coat. But yeah, just going with a progressive dry brush there. Nothing too crazy. I probably did maybe 5 layers of dry brushing. Progressively lighter. You don't want it to be too stark of a contrast. You don't want to go from a slate gray to a bright white. You want some gradation there. That's what I'm adding in here. Just coming in, hitting random rocks. I'm not going to concentrate here too much on everything. If I miss a couple of smaller rocks, that's fine. I'm gonna hit what I can, but there's gonna be a few places I miss, and that's okay. There's nothing saying that all rocks have to be gray. Quite a few that are brown, so got a brown base there, and I'm putting a grayish brown wash on this thing, so it should end up with pretty good coverage, looking pretty decent, even before the flocking. Now I'm putting one of those lighter dry brushes on the rock here. This is one of the last layers I'm going to do on this rock before I move on to the dirt base. For each progression, you want less and less paint on your brush. Now I'm putting a dry brush on the dirt here. It's going to help you get a more naturalistic or realistic look. All of this stuff is, I wouldn't say cartoonish, but kind of sensationalized. Or make sure you hit everything you can, but if you miss a few spots, you missed a few spots. It's not going to be that big a deal in the greater scheme of things. Again, with the dry brush, it's progressive layers of lighter and lighter colors. I ended up with almost a light peach color for my final dry brush on this brown. I knew that the wash was going to darken it quite a bit, so I wasn't too worried about that being too excessive. Kind of cleaning the brush a little bit, getting some of that excess paint off of there. And this is the lightest dry brush I'm going to put on this piece. Now you're going to want to give this a little time to dry before you go with the ink wash. Now, I understand it's a dry brush, but still the paint is somewhat wet, and I'm thinking maybe 20 minutes or so. Here's some ink wash that I've mixed up. Blank in the background there. I'm just liberally dousing this thing. I'm going with a dark sepia wash. Just giving it a even coat. I'm going to end up dabbing away some of the more excessive areas in a bit, but right now I'm just going for coverage. This stuff, as most miniature painters know, is a godsend. It's useful stuff. It's helpful when you're lacking raw talent or trying to knock something out quickly. And that's what I'm doing with these pieces, trying to get them bumped out. I don't want to spend too terribly much time on them. Going for quality, but not, I'm not trying to highlight with glazes and the like. Okay, here I go dabbing away some of that excessive wash that I put on. Just using a shop towel here. You don't have to be as careful as you are with a miniature when you're using something like a tack cloth or whatever. It doesn't really matter for something this robust. Okay, and here I'm going with some tacky glue and my static grass applicator. Some flocking here, some 2mm static grass, and some little clusters of 12mm. I'm just randomly dabbing some tacky glue on here. You don't want to be too uniform with this stuff. You don't want this thing to look like a golf course. You're going for something natural. Not something manicured, so keep it random. Don't put the glue everywhere. Don't put the grass everywhere. Organized chaos, as it were. Just making sure that I've got everything here. Well, not absolutely everything, but everything that I want to get. And I'm just using some cheap craft brush here. Okay, I've got my static grass applicator loaded. There it goes. I just turned it on, and to keep from getting shocked, I put a glove over the alligator clip there for the ground wire. Nothing like getting blasted on repeat by static discharge. Now this applicator is something I made. Any of you out there feeling envious, just keep in mind it's a capacity of your negative ion generator, not the actual size of your applicator that's important. Okay, here I am just tapping off that excess grass. And giving you a bird's eye view. Okay, now this is a trick I picked up from Luke Towan. That guy is the Bob Ross of miniature work. Putting a little nylon over a vacuum cleaner to suck up your static grass without actually sucking it up. It's a neat little trick. Okay. Here go my tufts and my glue bottle. Again, I'm just using tacky glue here. Picking out random spots that I think would look good with taller weeds or grass tufts, I guess. You want to keep this pretty random. Again, don't get too uniform. I've picked out half a dozen, maybe 9 spots on this thing that I felt could use a little accentuation. Okay, now that that's dried, I'm going over this thing with my kind of protective clear coat here. I'm using a polyacrylic by Minwax. Now this stuff I mix, I'd say half and half. Honestly, that's pretty much it. I've got a rag there for sopping up the excess. Here I'm just spraying this on, and a little spray bottle here. This stuff's great, honestly. I know a lot of hobbyists use Mod Podge and water, or even a PVA and water, but this stuff's made to protect hardwood floors. It dries flat. It's just a great product. I can't really speak highly enough of it. Okay, and now that that's had time to dry, it's time to go with the water effects. Here I've got a cup, some various acrylic inks from Liquitex I'll be using, and a tabletop casting, or yeah, I guess tabletop casting resin that I bought from Specialty Resins. I've also got some colored sawdust there. Now this resin's a 2-part tabletop epoxy. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So, and this stuff it's kind of important to get that ratio right. You're going by volume here, not weight. I've got a few ounces of each, maybe 2 or 3 ounces of each. Honestly, it's mixing in small portions is it's a little dicey, but I've done it before. It can be an issue, but if you're not comfortable, mix a little more. Make sure you get it right. Maybe have a few extra pieces ready to pour there. Okay, now here's a pro tip for epoxies. Generally, you can add in a latex or an acrylic paint or an acrylic ink. The paint is going to give you more of an opaque look, whereas the ink is going to give you a translucent, pigmented look. For something like a urethane resin, you cannot use this stuff at all, either one. You'll end up with foam, not good foam either. The last thing you want to do with a urethane resin is introduce moisture. That stuff reacts horribly. This epoxy resin, this stuff takes pigments, acrylic pigments and acrylic paints pretty well. So here I'm using those acrylic inks by Liquitex. Just a few drops of you know, a couple of different colors. You don't want to go too extreme, but again, this is exaggerated piece here. Everything's slightly oversaturated. Trying to go for a bluish green. Nothing too over the top. I'm not necessarily going for a mini golf water here. If it ends up looking like something from the Caribbean, I'll be all right with that. Whatever. To each their own. Here I'm taking a acid brush, just a cheap little throwaway brush to kind of work that epoxy into the crevices it doesn't really want to lay down in. Got my game face on again. Here I'm taking a little flexi straw just to blow away some of those air bubbles. An airbrush really doesn't work here. You can use a heat gun or a little torch. I've got both, but I went with the straw. Here I'm going with that pigmented sawdust from earlier. Honestly, I think this was a wasted step. After I put the kind of water effects, the wave texture on later, you don't really notice this stuff, honestly. I was kind of bummed. Now, if you decide not to go with the texture clear effect, I would go with something like that. It just adds a nice little touch. Here I'm using a clear latex caulking. It's paintable. It goes on white but dries clear. I'm adding a little of that ink to it. Got a little cup here, a couple of coffee stirrers that I'm going to be using to mix that ink in. I'm also using airbrush here just to kind of blow that stuff around, get a nice little ripple wave effect. That caulking trying to run away from me. Okay, just a drop or two of the ink. Shake that bottle up first before you unscrew the cap. Good enough. Coffee stir. And you don't have to stir that stuff too well if it's not mixed perfectly. I don't see that being a problem. Here I'm just putting that on with an acid brush. Like I said, this stuff goes on white. It dries clear. If you want to use Mod Podge, hey, have at it. Or some other water effect that's actual, water effect. For me, this stuff's great. It's like $3-4 a tube. A tube is going to last me quite a while, and honestly, it gives me a much better result than Mod Podge or the water effect does. Just kind of stippling that stuff around before I go over it with the airbrush. And here I'm just kind of breaking up some of those brush strokes. Not quite as big of a deal as it is with a Mod Podge coat, but still, you want to get rid of those brush strokes and those strong stipple marks. I was honestly a little surprised by how much I like this latex caulking for this. Here I am just wiping away some of the excess spots I got on there. All right, and that's dried. Now I'm going to take a little model paint here and just add in the slightest amount of white water, just along the shoreline edges. Just gonna water that down a little bit and go along some of those edges with a liner brush. Nothing too crazy, nothing too detailed, just, you know, just a little something to break that surface up. Honestly, I don't know how much it adds to it. It's going to be a personal preference sort of thing. I kind of like it just for the variety it adds, but hey, that's me. What do I know? Also, I don't know, you may have noticed we had something of a black eye there. I caught myself with a chain hoist at work. That was fun. It was a nice afternoon. Here's Carl. He likes it. He's happy. That's what matters. We have to keep Carl happy. Yeah. There you go. All right. That's it. Artist View. I hope you enjoyed this video series. Thanks for watching. And that concludes the series. Next week I'm going to have something different for you. It's going to be terrain related. It's going to be casting related. But it's going to be different nonetheless. Thanks for watching this series. Hopefully, with any luck, I can improve on my camera skills, my editing skills, my narrating skills. We'll see what happens there. No promises. Alright, see you next time. Thanks. Bye.